Okay. All right. The presentation we're going to be doing today, the presentation we'll be going over, first of all, is nutritional health and exercise. And the reason why we cover those topics is that a lot of the reason why we use mood-altering drugs is to the effects that the body produces. Alcohol isn't what gets a person high or euphoria. It's actually the brain slows down as a result of the depressant, and adrenaline is then pumped in, and then in the cerebral cortex, up here in the front of our brain, where we go to euphoria, you get this feeling of celebration. And in our bodies itself, also of people who use amphetamines, if you were to use amphetamines straight up, you'd be like getting an anxiety attack. Nobody want that. But what happens is endorphins are pumped in the brain because the brain speeds up, which gives people the feeling of euphoria because it's a natural narcotic. And it gives a feeling of self-confidence along with the exhilarated, process. So to begin with, we kind of look at what we put in our bodies first of all as far as nutrition. And there's lots of factors in health that are coming more and more clear to us. I just seen a study last week that showed that people who eliminate alcohol, nicotine, and low fats, low carbohydrates, and eat fruit on a regular basis and exercise live an additional 15 years beyond what the capability is of the average person. And that's just on the average. That doesn't all the other factors that go into living long, the longevity of physical health. There was a study that I had seen on a man who's at the forefront of medicines for increasing lifespan, and in exploring this area, he had said in an interview that initially seen where people were in poor physical health did not want that they had diabetes and severe arthritis, which isn't their fault, or other types of complications that created chronic pain or physical disability or physical deterioration. People did not want to live longer. So there was a mindset as far as thinking that was also going on with people that weren't living as long. They're literally shutting down. We've seen this for years where people get into cyclical thinking, repeating patterns and patterns in their life, and then they retire, and they stop thinking about what they're doing, and what happens is the body shuts down and dies. So health isn't just physical exercise, it's attitude, it's physical exercise, nutrition that we put in our body, awareness that we have about our lives and what direction we're going. When you're an old cuss like me, 50 or over, you have to either get with it or roll over and die, But in most cases, with all of us, we feel better if we're taking care of ourselves. And the first one we'll talk about is alcohol. Alcohol is what we call simple carbohydrate. Example of that is like a McDonald's hamburger. There's no more nutrition probably in the cardboard it's wrapped in. Okay, and so there's no nutritional value whatsoever, but there are calories, and which can cause people to get larger because they're drinking, and that's accelerating the amount of calories that they're putting in their body. I had one gentleman I worked with. He lost over 200 pounds last year when he stopped drinking because of the calorie intake. And of course he started working out and taking care of himself in that way. And the other thing is that, of course, when we're hammered or drinking and we're loaded and we're high, I don't know, I grew up in central United States, Chicago, Minneapolis, and I knew when I was hungover the next day going, God, I feel lousy. What did I eat last night? I look in the back seat and there'd be all these White Castle hamburger boxes. I mean like 7 or 8 of them, And I mean, you got if you ever been to a White Castle hamburger joint, you know, the grease is just rolling off of the after the fryers when they're making it in front of you. You know, you gotta be loaded just walking in the door almost. But more seriously, we end up eating more junk foods when we're drinking or using, because we're going, well, that sounds good, some pancakes and eggs, you know, at 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, or whatever. So we're not thinking reasonably about our eating plan and what we need to do. More aspects of this. Let me shut this door here. More aspects of this that we're talking about is looking at any type of sugar. You see, alcohol is interpreted by the body as a sugar. And when you stop drinking, if you've been a regular drinker for a long time, we sometimes crave alcohol, crave sugar in replacement for the alcohol. I worked with a homeless shelter out here for a number of years, and you know, it's kind of funny. People were literally late stage alcoholic, and they bring them out in, and a lot of nonprofit organizations donate pastries after pastries, all these sugar products. Well, the people were getting switching from alcohol to these pastries, and then leaving after that and detoxing off the sugar and going and having cravings for alcohol. Now, that's another factor involved with that. But other types of sugars are also bad for us that are created in the body. Raw processed sugar, candies, cookies. You look in the grocery store, I would believe that probably 25% of the foods out there are strong sugar-based products.
Doesn't most food, after you eat it,
process into sugar? Yeah, we'll talk about it. For instance, carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Pastas, potatoes, rice. What they do, they convert back into sugar.
Yeah.
And so do fruit, but I think that our bodies are able to process that a lot easier and translate that maybe into direct energy more so.
My dad was a diabetic, so that's why
And the best diet out that I've seen for people in following nutrition is the diabetic diet, which is general. It's low fat and low carbohydrates, and both of those are difficult on the body. If you're going, when we're eating carbohydrates, it's better for us to eat them earlier in the day, because most of us work during the days and have the evenings off. So it's better not to have a carbohydrate at night, because that'll translate back into fat. And then it takes more energy for the body to be able to transfer that from fat back to energy. Okay? So it's better at night, say, to have your pastas earlier in the day for lunch or breakfast. Breads, for instance, are carbohydrate. Cereal is a carbohydrate, so eating cereal late at night is not a good idea. We tend to do that because it's simple to do, but there are other alternatives that we can use to fill that appetite in the evening, and we'll talk some on those. But the evening, it's better to replace a carbohydrate with vegetables or a big salad. Okay, moving on. I don't always keep on track with all the material the way that it's written here, and we tend to go off track a little bit, but we seem to get through the whole process. Limiting gradual change your diet early in recovery, cutting down caffeine intake, sugar, nicotine, adding nutrition foods, cutting down on stressful mental, physical changes will help stabilize blood sugar levels, because anxiety turns into adrenaline, and that burns off more sugars, and then it leaves us absent, for periods of time, as far as the blood sugar levels not balancing out as well. So some of the general ideas, in dieting are to watch these things. Give you a clear indication about what eating disorders are, because a lot of people who have substance abuse issues, not all but some, translate back into developing an eating disorder after they stop a other type of substance that they had been using as a crutch, for instance, you know, and filling themselves up at night or whatever. But 70% of the America is overweight, and that has to do with lots of things. It has to do with, you know, a concept of sitting down in front of the TV set and eating in front of the TV set, and then we continue to go through this process. And, you know, quite simply, I've gotten up from the TV set right before bed and found 4 bowls sitting there before me and not knowing how they got there, you know, kind of a gray out or weight out or whatever you want to call it. But we tend to eat more sitting in front of the TV set because we're not separating the meal times. We're stretching them out. And but to go over a little bit of eating disorders, the first one we talk about is overweight, compulsive overeating. And that is a form of eating disorder. It's a form of an addiction, a behavioral addiction you could call it. And with all eating disorders, there are 2 different components. One is the person's eating plan and focusing on that change so that they balance that out. The second is people with eating disorders tend to have other emotional difficulties in interactions and personal interactions and relationships with other people. Low self-esteem has been created from shame and embarrassment associated to weight gain in comparison to other people. You know, for instance, people who are overweight don't like to go swimming because then their body weight is exposed to other people. You know, those are some of the factors, but other factors recede that person's sense of confidence in themselves. Also, there are some characteristics of the more intensive, you could say more intensive eating disorders where the person has developed severe emotional issues. And some of that has been derived from childhood development. I ran an eating disorder facility in Arizona for a year as administrative director, a residential facility for women. And what we found was that people with bulimia, you know, the extent of a bulimia, we know, you know, we all are aware of, you know, people sticking their fingers down their throat to throw up. It's a matter of eating compulsively and then purging out that food substance. And there's a variety of ways that they do that. Sometimes they throw up and they get to the point of being able to throw up at will. People sometimes will get to the point of using laxatives. And the bad thing about laxatives is that the intestinal wall holds 90% of our immune system. And with that, the intestinal wall also absorbs its nutrients to keep it alive. And if food is being passed through and it's not getting nutrients, it dries out and dies, or it just dies. And so some people with bulimia end up having large sections of their intestinal wall taken out. There's also a medical surgery that they cut out large portions of the intestines. And the long-term effects of that are disastrous in a person's health and their ability to be able to maintain immune system and maintain vitamin balance and all that, because they're not getting the nutrients necessary, and they have to then take huge amounts of pills to fill that on a regular basis. So they're doing it chemically, synthetically, you could say, and which isn't a good, healthy idea to a long life. The other type of bulimia is people who use exercise as a way of purging. Basically, you can think of bulimia as a person getting fixated on having a certain body type and image. And with that, they tend to be judgmental of other people who don't have that body type. There's a lot of times there's a lot of anger associated to that due to, this is not trying to generalize, but there tends to be a lot of dominant parent overprotection of the child. With a lot of eating disorder facilities, they get a lot of referrals from Christian-based family systems, and the Christian religion has been used, you know, to suppress that child's individuality and follow that parent's perception. Now, ironically, one of the largest facilities out there for eating disorders is called Bermuda Ranch, which is a Christian-based eating disorder facility. So they use that as a way of getting employed to get clients referred to them, but then they use the sanction of this religious belief to create the therapy. And I think it kind of suppresses that individuality, again, of the young women who tend to go into those programs. When I see women today who rarely, but when I do see a woman who's got eating disorders like these with family dominance, I recommend them get away from their family and create independence for themselves in their thinking and choices that they make. And it helps along the way in creating more individuality and freedom of choice. The other thing is anorexia. Now, anorexia is tied to the same kind of dominant parental background. The kids, young women will tend to use in interviewing women who've had anorexia, they would say that the way to control the world around them, they can choose not to eat. And that's kind of a fixation of childhood, you know. When a little kid pushes back the green bean and says, I'm not going to eat. So they create that polarity in their way that they maintain nutrition for themselves, which destroys them. So you can see that it's necessary not only to have an eating plan for people with eating disorders, but also counseling around some of these outlying areas. If people are overweight, for instance, and they lose huge amounts of weight, a lot of times I've seen them convert into interpreting sexual attention as nurturing. So either they become victimized by other people, by getting into relationships that are based on using sex, or they become sex addicts themselves. And this is a general outline. I'm not saying all people lose weight, but there are factors that need to be addressed with the person developing self-esteem and building healthy relationships. Okay, any other questions on eating disorders? Okay, moving on. Now, a balance, basic rules of healthy diet is, number one, eating at least 3 meals a day. Diabetic Association actually recommends you eat more, and we've seen more studies showing that people are more grazers, that it's better to eat small meals. And the benefit of that is regulating blood sugar levels, okay, that it evens out. The most important meal is breakfast, because it's the longest period of time our bodies have been without nutrition, so it helps to balance out of blood sugar levels again first thing in the morning. There's ways of doing that. You know, myself, you know, will eat egg substitute, egg beaters, or you know, white eggs, white yolk eggs. It tastes just like regular eggs, the way they make them, and a piece of toast, and a glass of fruit juice. You know, it's important to be able to eat on a regular basis fruit juices and fruits and fresh vegetables. Now, there's been studies out to show that fruit juices help you in dealing with different types of diseases. For instance, wine, a glass of wine a day to 2 glasses will help to improve a person's, you know, they'll have less heart disease. But people who drink 3 glasses of wine a night or more, you know, increase that tenfold, you know, the risk of heart disease. So if you have a problem limiting yourself to 1 or 2 glasses of wine an evening, a simple alternative to that is drinking red grape juice. It has the same same benefits as wine does in improving the risk of heart disease. Other types of fruit, I've seen studies that will help aid people in dealing with cancers. So there's a variety of different ways that using a variety of different fruit juices rather than isolating fruits rather than just isolating to one. rotating and trying different ones can be helpful for each individual. Any questions up here?
How about white grape juice?
It doesn't have the components for high blood pressure is what I said. The red grape is
The
very
best.
ironic, is that.
Most of your store-bought juices anyways aren't that healthy for you.
Yeah, a lot of them are processed with a lot of sugar.
That's why you have to read labels.
Yeah, and
I learned to do that about 4 years ago. I had a kid. I was like, oh.
Mhm.
yeah, a lot of them have a lot of sugar in them. Eating fresh vegetables is something that we can do without too much difficulty, because there's, you can go to the fresh vegetable section and get a steamer. You can get a $2, $3 steamer that fits in the pan, like a little wafer, little holes in it, and boils. Or you can get the real fancy ones, electric timer to go off. But either one helps to steam the vegetables, and then you can use different types of sauces to bring out the spices and flavor of them. All good for you. Also, a salad is good. And the other benefit of that is that salads are also roughage, and it helps the food pass through the intestines. So eating a salad a day at least is, with lunch or as part of your dinner, is very important. And there's a variety of different types of salad dressings, and this is one of those that you have to watch out for. Ranch dressing has a ton of calories. Anything with mayo product has a ton of calories in it. Look at it, and they'll say 120 calories per serving, and I'll usually use 2 servings, on a salad. So that's quite a bit. But if you look at some of the Italian dressings has maybe 15 to 25 calories, and are very limited. So
you can even buy the light version.
Or light version, or balsamic is another variety of that. Putting different small fruit in there can help. In a salad, or cottage cheese can be a little variety in your salad making. But you may find 1 or 2 that you really get to the point of enjoying and rotating. The other thing is reduce, eliminate refined processed foods. Like, one is white bread. A lot of us get addicted to white bread. But the problem with it is that it is bleached bleached flour, and due to that, it does not break down as effectively in the body. The average 35-year-old male has 2.5 pounds of unprocessed dough in the lining of their intestines. Not a good thing for us. So eating more whole wheat, multi-grain breads are helpful for our nutrition, and they have flavor to them. White bread really doesn't have any flavor of its own. So once you get accustomed to it, you enjoy it. The other thing is processed rice. Processed rice, white rice, has no nutritional value again. It's been bleached out, unless you get enriched rice, which they induce the chemicals back in there. And again, it's chemically treated. Brown rice is better for us, but most people don't like it because it's a little gummy, when you eat it. Well, there's simple ways of blending brown and white rice. You get it in the store that way, where they have spices that make it flavorful. But those are things that you can do to enhance that for yourself. Eating buckwheat, oatmeal, peas. At night, what I'll do sometimes, if I get hungry later on, oatmeal will help to process foods much quicker, and actually helps your metabolism. It's one of the few that works in kind of a reaction that improves the quality of your diet. So what I'll do is I'll take a soy milk and blend it with a fruit, a pear or apple or something, in a blender with oatmeal, 30-second oatmeal process, and put it in a blender so it gets it thick, and drink it. And it's like a shake.
Oh, you like that soy milk, huh?
I can't stand soy milk.
Some people, it depends on the person. They have a variety of different flavorings to it.
I've
The
tasted
problem,
more than
The problem with milk is that a cow has 4 stomachs to
Mhm.
process this through, and we only have one. It's actually harder on our system to process milk. And a lot of us get confused that 2% milk is like 2%, but it's really just 2% less fat.
How about skim?
Skim is better for you
Good.
if you can get used to it. But drinking 2% milk is still like eating 2 pounds of bacon
Yeah.
in a glass of milk.
Really?
You know, yeah. It's
But
not
don't
that good
kids,
for us.
if you have small kids though, don't they need that?
They can use the calcium and some of the nutrients, but the problem with this is it's not very good. There was a study done in the Midwest where a lot of people eat dairy products and a lot of red meat, and kids that were 11 years old had the cholesterol levels of a 50-year-old man.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, so it can build up in their system
Thought they
very
needed
easily.
it.
Well, that's what we hear.
Yeah.
That through the got milk,
Yeah.
healthy, and it's not that good a thing. There's other alternatives. Rice milk or soy milk are alternatives. Goat cheese is it's not, it's got a potent flavor to it, but it's a type of cheese that you can use. Goat milk is also another one that's good for you. So the other thing is, moving on, is cutting down sugar and salt. Because it burns off our taste buds off of our tongue. And what we do is that if we decrease the amount of sugar and salt, eventually we grow back these and we develop these different flavors back on our tongue, where we can taste the robust flavors of other types of food. So decreasing salt, because salt will increase high blood pressure, and too much salt isn't that good for us, and salt also is sugar. Now the other thing is drinking at least 6 to 8 glasses of water a day. Now that seems like a lot of water, and they actually suggest you drink a lot more than that. And on top of it, if you drink caffeinated products, they suggest you drink twice as much caffeinated product to make up for losing it, the water, through urination. So what do we do to replace that? Also, carbonation isn't that good for us. It will decrease calcium in our bodies. I did it for years, and all of a sudden I went to the doctor and they said, geez, you're real low on calcium. And so eliminating those kind of carbonation drinks is important. Also, drinking sugar-free sodas. There's been studies to show that some of the sugar-free drinks, once it's in the bloodstream, turns to, what do they put in your body when you die?
Formaldehyde?
It turns into formaldehyde.
Oh, that's disgusting.
Really?
So there's all sorts of cancers that can develop as a result of that.
Is that from the kind of sweetener they use in that?
Yeah, yes it is.
Huh.
So avoiding the sugar-free drinks along with the sugar drinks. One alternative that I found is just getting the flavor of for instance, lemon or lime. Those plastic lemons and plastic limes have like 100% fruit juices in them. And I always have a lemon and lime around, and what I'll do is take a big tumbler glass and take a squirt of either one or both of them with ice water. It gives a robust flavor. Also, raspberry flavor, if you can find an herbal place that has that, to put that in without the sugar, will give you that flavor without the sugar.
Now those juices in those little squeeze balls, like you're saying, like little plastic, those are 100%?
Well, those are actually, are you talking about?
Well, you said like little plastic lemon or plastic lemon.
Oh, the plastic green, the
Right.
green lemon?
Right.
Yeah, it's like 99%.
Oh,
Yeah, it's good for us. And actually the citrus helps break down the foods. It's a natural laxative in that way.
I like to just cut up a lemon and a lime.
Yeah, it's
Or
same
an
kind of
orange
thing.
and put it in.
Same kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Even a
Or-
cucumber.
Yeah, cucumbers are really good. I've heard that. I want to try that.
It is. And
Yeah.
the first time I heard that, I thought, oh, that's icky, but I tasted it and it was really good.
my grandma used to make cucumber iced tea. That's pretty good.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's something I'm going to try out.
It's good.
It sounds really good. I mean, it doesn't sound really good.
No,
but
it doesn't, but
sounds good from what I've heard.
It's very
feedback.
refreshing.
Yeah. but that helps to enhance our drinking liquids. And what happens is the toxins build up in our body, and that's why our urinary tract, our pee looks very dark yellow, is that we're not getting rid of the toxins in our body.
Right.
We're getting dehydrated. You could say, what's the word? Not dehydrated. I guess it is dehydrated.
It's dehydrated.
The other thing is that our bowel is. It's recommended that look at what type of foods we're talking about eating. Salads can help to increase our bodies being able to push it out. If you have a bowel that is a size, comparatively to a banana in size and shape, that's a good healthy stool. People who end up with those little rabbit turds, you could say, are again dehydrated and their body or constipated, and that's not very good for us either. So finding a balance of that. If you have too much diarrhea, for instance, from the foods you're eating, then you need to supplement with more firm foods. Okay. Now, stress management, exercise. Let's talk a little bit about exercise. And exercise is very important in the sense that we need that energy level. And now if you work a job that you're breaking a sweat, where your heart is beating, you can feel it beating inside your chest, and you're breathing heavier for 45 minutes a day, you're doing as much exercise you probably need on the cardiovascular. Okay, but for instance, I noticed people who don't work out with weights or in a gym, they tend to have one shoulder more down than the other because they're right or left-handed. So more muscle proportion, where if you're working on a gym, you're balancing that out. And that's got to be better on your spine by doing that. Also, by working out, I worked out in gyms for many, many years, and part of what happens is, I'll get on that bicycle, I'll be on level 7 or 8, and I'll be sweating like a son of a gun next to some young kid trying to keep up with them, And after about 20, 30 minutes on there, I look down and it says I burned off 120 calories. Well, that's taking one bite out of a Snickers bar. Okay. It's not that great, but you see, what happens if I keep that sweat going for 45 minutes, doing various things where I'm working out, keeping that cardiovascular moving for 45 minutes, it helps my body be able to burn off more calories in the next 36 hours, so that I'm burning off more calories when I'm sleeping, walking, eating, talking, sitting down, watching TV. Because I'm burning off more calories, my metabolism has speeded up. Then that gives me more energy. Plus, as a result of doing this type of adrenaline work, cardiovascular, endorphins are released into my bloodstream, which helps me to ease off stress and balance that out of my life, because it'll stay in my system for a longer period of time. So all that in all is better for us to be able to have a balance of doing it. How can I do that? One of them is walking. If you have an opportunity to have a partner that you can spend 45 minutes, get up early in the morning and walk before you go to work, it's a wonderful opportunity. I do it every day. We walk our 2 dogs. They usually walk us. But
yeah, right.
they're pulling us along. But it gives us an opportunity to be able to get the oxygenating the cells in the blood, and then that's an opportunity for me to feel more healthy, energized, and I'm ready to go. It's like taking 2 cups of coffee just by doing that. The other thing is bicycling is another alternative, which are low impact on the knees. And bicycling around in this type of environment is usually something you can do pretty much year-round, even with rain. As long as it's not raining sideways, if you got a raincoat on, you can go out riding. And then again, the other alternative would be the gyms, and they have women's gyms around here, and also mixed co-ed gyms, one right next door to us here in McMinnville. So there are a variety of places I can continue to do that. The important thing is I find a regimen that I can do every day. And I find that niche, that time element, because what I'll do is I push everything to the side because I just don't have the time to do it unless I set the time up to do it.
Right.
Okay? And that's the big difference there. And we can keep in good health and and that's going to help our attitude and help our longevity of physical health and well-being for many years. Okay. Anything else? Anybody want to throw anything else? Swimming is another alternative for people if they're
Aerobics,
conducive to it. Aerobics.
Swim class.
Swim class.
It's wonderful.
That's an excellent one. Okay, now the next one is dealing with stress. And now, when we're talking about different types of stress management, we're talking about different types of meditation. I'm not talking about, getting into some regimented yoga class where you pull your anal sphincter upside your butt and go, you might have a problem pulling it back down, no, I'm just kidding. But the thing is that there are a variety of different types of meditation that a person can do. We talked about exercising the body. The other side is exercising our mind, okay? And that has to do with concentration levels and brain function, okay? They've just been able to, through MRIs in the past 10 years, be able to examine brain activity. Some of the most effective ways of creating brain activity are meditation, are reading, and actually, because reading, you're reading, words and converting them to images, and that spans out in our brain, and that creates this concentration focus point. The other one is reading music is actually the most concentrated focus of brain activity, because it's kind of like reading a foreign language, I guess. Another one is playing video games. It actually creates a focus and attention at the person, and actually it's much more healthy for us to have that activity associated to our evening in front of just sitting in front of the TV. Regulate that where we're spending down for, if we're going to sit down for 2 hours, watch a movie, get up, play a video game, or play cards, or read a book, or do some laundry, do some sort of indifferent activity in between, so that we're not, because we get zoned out, and actually by that our brain function slows down a little bit. Meditation can be a focus, and the most effective type of meditation for doing this that I've seen, I believe, is Raja Yoga, and because you can do this without taking on their religious beliefs. It's a form of guided imagery where you focus on your breath, and if you're a strong Christian background, you can meditate on the Word of God. You can do all sorts of things like that if you have some concern about that, about bringing in outside energy. But the biggest focus is concentration, because when we focus our attention, it only lasts for about 15 to 20 seconds at the longest, and then we're moving out to other things. So what we do is we bring that attention back to what we're doing. You could simply put a picture up on the wall and focus on that picture, and then after you start drifting off, bring you back to that picture again in the here and now. That is creating concentration and focus. The meditation form I was talking about, Raja Yoga, uses the imagery of when you breathe in, you use the mantra, general mantra, so, not my voice, but your own, then on the inhalation, and hum on the exhalation, so hum. So when you're breathing, you hear your own calming voice at a deeper pitch or whatever, and calmer pitch, as you're breathing, and you're hearing this voice. And now the other part of this imagery is you interpret a light being your breath as you're breathing in through the nostrils, and you go through, sometimes they start at the forehead, and they breathe back down to the base of the spine. But what they do then is or the top of the spine, I'm saying, the base of the skull. And they breathe down to the base of the spine and back up, like an elevator shaft with this blue, little thin blue light and hearing the mantra at the same time. So you're focusing on a visual image of a light and the audio interpretation of a sound as you're breathing. And when you move off of this, you come back to it. Okay? That's like exercising, 4 sets of exercise in the gym that they recommend for building muscle tone. You're building concentration levels. What does that do? What those concentration levels, and they suggest that as far as video games, Eric Clapton said he sits down and plays video games for an hour and a half at a setting. It helps him in his creativity and concentration. So what does it do for doing this type of meditation? You're focusing and concentrating so that normally our activity in our brain, we're randomly thinking about experiences that we've had in the past and experiences that we're having in the future, that may happen in the future. So we are going from the past to the future, and rarely are we in the here and now, in the present. And what that does is it focuses attention onto the present. The past brings up anxiety over consequences, and a lot of times we're rehashing old unresolved conflicts by bringing up the past. We call it debriefing in psychology. And what that does, it brings up adrenaline from the brain when we start thinking about those things, and that's released in the body. When we start worrying about the future, we start looking at the loss of control in our life, and that creates adrenaline, okay? And that is released in our bodies. So by staying in the present, we're less inclined to create adrenaline, okay, reaction. Now the other side of that is what we do in our thinking process. We're analytical beings, so we're naturally negative. We're analytical. We take things apart, right? So if I've had those bad days where I start off in the morning and say, what a rotten day, and then next thing, and they're all bad, right? We've all had those days. We think that there's a cloud following us around, but it's usually our own attitude that's creating that.
It's true.
And so one of the things, and I'm not a tiptoe through the tulips kind of guy, but positive thinking models are effective in creating a direction that we want in our life, okay? And I'll give you an example of this. Came to mind when I was in a halfway house in Minneapolis. There was this artist who, the halfway house was called Progress Valley. And he made a painting for up on the wall there of this guy with this walking stick walking down this canyon, and he called it Progress Valley, right? Well, about 12 years later, I was a counselor in Arizona. I went to this residential facility called Valley Hope. And the same artist made a similar drawing, but this time instead of being at the top of the canyon path, he was halfway down. Okay? So we're following this path in our life. And we have these obstacles that are sticking out, jabs. We just want to clear out the clutter, okay? We're just trying to make that waiting room that we're waiting in for that next experience to happen to be the most comfortable we can be in. What can I do to create that? One is shut this thing off up here in my head. Shut off the negative thinking by creating the possibility, they call it quantum physics, of the possibilities of awareness of life, that there can be change in who we are and what we experience in our life can be we're part of that example. It is not just random chaos that occurs in our life. It's an experience that we're drawing to us. So if I start off the day in the morning and I start my day off, I'm not embarrassed to say this, I think about the abundancy and prosperity coming into my life today, that new experiences are going to come about that are going to be new awarenesses, new relationships with people, a new adventure. Okay? Sort of like when I go out in the woods behind my house and walk around, I imagine myself hiking through the woods when I was a little kid. I imagine going underneath the Christmas tree, Christmas morning, to get the presents. Get that type of energy, that attitude, before I get out of bed. Now, plenty of things can happen between the time I get out of bed through the rest of the day, where it can change very quickly. But if I'm looking that way, a lot of times when I'm driving to work in the morning, I'm going, wow, what a nice day. All of a sudden some some positive thoughts start to come into play that were seeded probably by that experience, because I hadn't had that before. It was like, what's that guy doing in front of me? When is he going to move his car? You know, get around him, you know. And I'm starting to think more of the concept, or more of looking at the positive. And you see, if I'm in a negative place through the day, and I've been there where my thinking has just been in a hole, and something good happened, it would go right by me. But you see, if I start off with some possibility thinking, then if something good happens, I can grab a hold of it and say, okay, something good happened, that's cool.
But you know, I work with a guy like that. I got this theory about him. He's got to have chaos in his life to survive. Yeah. And he's just about the most negative person I know. Not, I mean.
And he draws negativity.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. He gets to work at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he's in a bad mood. Mm-hmm. And well, he corners me for half hour telling me about his wife and all this. And now he's probably 50 years old or so. Yeah. And he's starting to develop a high blood pressure. He's got a sleeping disorder. He's got to be hooked up to a machine at night.
Let's just use that as a perfect example. Let's use that example. He was probably the way that most men, and most people, women too, get associated to the drive of an American force is to be angry. Mm. To be on top of things, you have to be ready, you know, prepared. Well, that's like a ball of energy. Adrenaline is anger, okay? It's an action energy, and yes, it is. But that ball of energy doesn't go out to a roll only. It translates inside too. Okay, turns into high blood pressure, turns into stomach problems, turns into other types of discord in our relationships with other people. So there's a lot of negative to that, and what we've been buying into is got milk, is got anger. You know, you want to get ahead, push ahead. And when you know, if I'm in a reaction to everything around me, which happens sometimes, that isn't a mode that I think I'm really being who I am. I think I'm more in touch when I slow down, get a focus on what goals I have, what I want to do today, and set my goals accordingly. Then I'm more of who I am. Mm-hmm. And when I'm in that reaction, I'm just in a reaction of some other person.
Right. Well, you see, he has his moments where he actually, you know, he's a heck of a nice guy. He's got his moments, but it don't take much, and he's right there,
you know? Right there, because he's gotten into the cyclical, addictive thinking pattern. Mm-hmm. And we have to separate ourselves in order to. I mean, you know, just think about it. You know, I take the same road to work every day. Try a different route to work. I'm not going to say it's going to change your life, but what you'll notice is that time slows down. You start to recognize more of what is around you when you take that other road. You know, taking another approach gives you an opportunity to see things in a different perspective. It livens you up. You know, the old saying is that the way that you get an old dog to act young is you get a younger dog around him.
That's true.
And you have that opportunity to be able to react to situations in a more positive note if you're seeing that there are some other ways of seeing the world around us. Okay. Any other questions? Anybody have anything else?
What do you think about people that maybe set their expectations too high for themselves?
Well, let's look at that in one form of addiction that is based on optimism, gambling, right? Gambling is a form of optimism in thinking I'm going to win, or the person getting unrealistic expectations that they're going to accomplish this goal and move on. They're acting immature almost in of looking at that as solving all their problems, aren't they? And we have to be, you're right, being skeptical means being reasonable, okay? And being reasonable about the possibilities is I'm not going to throw all my money into, you know, one thing. I'm going to explore the possibilities and try different ways and see how they work in a reasonable fashion. You know, there are some fundamental aspects of analytical thinking that are helpful to us. you know, because it creates reason in our life. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know, because there are some people who are just, you know, I'm going to buy this house, I'm going to do this, and my life's going to change. Not true, not necessarily true.
A lot of times that can be detrimental to
Yeah.
you.
That's what I was just gonna say. Is if
Everybody-
you set your goal too high and then you don't accomplish it, you think you're a bad person.
Right, right. And being able to have realistic goals, and one of the ways I can have realistic goals, a lot of times is that social aspect of asking for feedback from other people, that I trust their perception. You know, what do you think of this? You know, how do you think that this would work? You know, we're changing human beings. We're not the same person we were 20 years ago, thank God, you know. But we are changing into a different form of who we are. And there's all sorts of possibilities of that direction happening. You know, and I can look at what direction I want that path to go in my future. You know, just make it a little less cluttered. You know, one of the aspects that's a very simple way to cut down the mind process, is MP3 players. And that's you know, is listening to music. And music is a real gratifying way of relaxing. And except for rap music, I'm sorry.
I'm listening to it. I put my iPod on and I go out and work.
Yeah, you shut down your mind in the process where you don't have to have the tapes going over and over in your mind. And I do that when I'm working out at the gym. I'll have music on, or ride my bicycle, I'll have music on that I enjoy and brings me a sense of satisfaction. That helps to cut out some of the clutter. I call it the committee in session in my head, spinning around. And that's because I'm a lot of times, you know, circling experiences that I felt weren't resolved and I can't resolve because they're in the past. And I'm getting frustrated about that, so I have my voices on that, and I have my voices on the fear of potential risks of the future, of what direction things are going, that are going to, I feel that are going to create chaos in my life. So fear is the biggest factor that triggers this through my projection of the past to the future, that triggers adrenaline. And if I can calm down, and I'm going to be in a much more centered place, realistic place, and reasonable place of making choices for what direction I want to go. I think that covers this topic, and we're going to just take a few minutes while I change this video, and we'll move on to the next one.